All right, this is a 2015 Dodge Challenger Scat Pack 392, running hot. It's got pressure in the cooling system. We're gonna replace the head gasket. So first thing we're gonna do, we're gonna roll it into the shop. We're gonna lift it up on the lift. We're gonna get up under it. We're gonna loosen up the bolts to the exhaust. Once we loosen these bolts to the exhaust, we can pretty much do the rest of the project from above. So it's only 3 bolts on each side. So then we get under it. You can actually get access to the drain plug for the radiator. Right there, you can see it right there. Drain out all the coolant so you have less of a mess later on. Next, you're gonna bring it down. You're gonna remove the cowl and wipers. Pretty easy, you just got some clips on both sides right there. You got 13 millimeter to remove the wipers. Then you can lift up the cowl cover, and then you have that bar under there. Remove that bar. On each side, you're gonna have either 13 millimeter or 15 millimeter bolts. There's the PCM on that side right there. Remove those, swing that out of the way. You'll be able to pull the bar out of the way. Also, you have the wiper motor there. Make sure you pull that out of the way. It's like a little rubber grommet holding onto that bar right there. You just give it a push, it'll come right off. You got some of these little 392 hammy plastic covers. You can just pop those right off. They'll lift right up, put them to the side. Make sure you don't scratch those. And you get access to the wiring harness underneath. And also those little insulating covers underneath. On this side, you may have to pull that oil cap off. Make it easier. But everything just pops right off. Now that you have access underneath, you have the wiring harness here. Just with the hook, you can pull those little red locks. You can press the tabs and they'll pop right off on both sides. The ignition coils and the fuel injectors, both, and then you can kind of swing them out of the way. So then you can remove your ignition coils. They're 10 millimeter little bolts, and they kind of pop right out. Pretty easy. They give you plenty of space, and then you can move anything else that's in the way, any hose or anything. Be really careful not to break anything, obviously. Over here you see me removing the bolts for the intake manifold also, because that's the next step. There's going to be some little hoses. You're going to have to disconnect the fuel line with a special disconnect tool, and then it just comes right out. Make sure that you disconnect the hoses from behind. There's some hoses behind the intake. Next, you can swing the harness out of the way so you can remove the valve cover. If you haven't removed your ignition coils, remove those. All the little 8 millimeter bolts. Some of them are hard to reach, but they're all there. Stick your hand in there, pull them off. It should pop right off, and then you have access to the valve train. And you're gonna do the same thing on the other side. Over here, you see me also removing the belt with a tensioner that's on the front side of that head right there. That's gonna have to come out too. And any ground strap that's behind the head also. Make sure you remove all that. Double check, make sure everything is disconnected, everything is removed. Next, you're gonna remove the rocker assembly on that side. Pull those off, make sure you keep everything organized and in the same order that it's in, because some of those are different orders, those push rods. And then you're gonna remove the head bolts, is what I'm doing here, 15 millimeters. Once you pull those out to the side, and then the head is loose, and then get an extra pair of hands if you got it, and you can pull it right on out. Then you're gonna do the same thing on the other side. Ignition coils here. Once those ignition coils are out, you can pull those out, and then the valve cover. And it's also tight on this side as well. On this passenger side, it's a little bit tighter, but same concept. You might have to get a shorter tool, shorter socket maybe, and squeeze your hand in a little bit more. And then you also have the dipstick on that side. You may have to loosen up the bolt for the dipstick and pull it out and swing that out of the way. Also same concept here, remove the valve train, the rockers. And same thing, make sure you keep them all together. pull them out of the way along with your push rods. Some of these bolt heads were a little bit stubborn, a little bit tight, so it took me a little bit more work. And same thing, make sure you remove the ground straps on the backside. Keep the rockers organized and push rods organized. And then here's your 15 millimeter bolt removal here for the heads. And same thing, get an extra pair of hands to help you out if you need it. Can be a little heavy, can be a little cumbersome to remove it with the exhaust manifold and everything. Had to give it a little pry on the corner to pop it out. Once it's loose, you can pull it out, and you have access to the cylinders right there. Inspect, make sure your pistons are good. You don't see any damage or anything out of the ordinary. And make sure that you clean the cylinders of any coolant that falls in them. Clean everything up really good so that way you don't have any flash rust on the cylinders. And here's my table here where you see me put the valve train, the push rods, the head bolts. Keep it organized just like this so that way you know where everything goes and the different lengths of push rods, you see them there. Here's our heads right here. Now you just got to disassemble the exhaust manifolds of each side and they're ready to go to the machine shop to get resurfaced. So in the meantime, I'm going to prep the surface of the head on each side with a brush, the wire brush, or a Scotch pad. Make sure all the surfaces are nice and clean and smooth. See, this is what it's supposed to look like. Make sure you get any type of dust up. Make sure you blow the surfaces really clean. And prepare the surface for the new head gaskets and the new heads. You're going to do the same thing on both sides. So here you see me laying out the new head gasket. Compare it with the old head gasket. Make sure that you're putting it on the same way and all the holes are lining up perfectly. Take your time and study that. This is a very important step here. Also make sure you have your locator pins on there, very important also. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. Make sure you move your harness and everything out of the way. Move anything that's in the way. Make sure your head gasket's sitting on there really nice and flat. Make sure all the holes line up. Everything is nice and clean. Each head gasket is slightly different, each head. So make sure that you get the correct one. Usually it'll have it marked on there and it'll say up or down to know how to put it on. Here's the heads that came back from the machine shop. They gave it a nice resurface. Really nice finish. Now we're going to give it a finish here. See, there you go. Nice and clean. They're ready to go on for the exhaust gaskets. Now this is after I put the heads on. I got new head bolts. Those will be going in too. There they are. Always put new head bolts on. Make sure they're clean. Give it a tiny, tiny bit of oil and clean out your holes for the head bolts. Here you see me placing them down. I'm going to sit them in and then I'm going to kind of drive them down a little bit. Just enough to where I give a little bit of contact. Same thing on the other side. And then we're going to make sure that we torque them according to spec. If you don't have the specs, make sure you look them up online. Very important part of the process here because you don't want to over torque them or under torque them. Here you see me putting rags in the hole so we don't have anything fall into the cylinders through the intake ports. So here I have my handy dandy torque wrench, a digital one. You can use a digital one or a manual one. Just make sure you use one. And torque according to spec on both sides. As I said before, it's a little bit tighter on this passenger side here, but it can be done. Just take your time. Don't skip this step. This process takes a while, but From here, it's pretty much downhill. Everything will fall into place after this. Also, make sure you have good lighting, just in case you see anything out of the ordinary, anything strange. And of course, make sure that nothing is pinched under the head. Here you see me putting the push rods back in. Make sure they sit on the lifters correctly, very important. And here you see me tightening down the rocker arm assemblies. Make sure everything is seated correctly. Sometimes you might think it's on the lifter and it's sitting correctly, but if you have any doubts, pull them out, try it again. Torque everything down carefully on both sides, and then spin the motor by hand to make sure you see the valves moving smoothly. Here we're going to put valve covers on with new valve cover gaskets on both sides. While you're doing a job like this, make sure you put all new gaskets so you don't have any leaks. Valve covers back on. I'm tightening it back down. Gonna do the same thing on both sides. Those bottom ones are a little tough to get to. Torque them down by hand so you don't over tighten them. We're ready for the ignition coils. There they are. Once those get tightened back down, you can start connecting the harness back on there. Make sure it clips in. Same thing on the other side. Stick the ignition coils in, tighten them down, along with the connectors for the harness. Now you're ready for your intake manifold with new gaskets, of course. Make sure you're not sitting on anything that you're not supposed to. Sitting down properly. You can kind of start the bolts off by hand down there at the base. Make sure you have your hoses and connectors all there. Now you're ready to tighten everything down. You're able to connect your harness, your hoses. Now you can put your belt on and you're ready to start. Double check, make sure everything is on there like it's supposed to. Once you got your coolant in and you got everything running properly, put all your covers back on, you're ready for a test drive. Now make sure when you run it at operating temperature, make sure your heat works. It means all your coolant is circulating. And test drive. Now this car's ready for the customer. Car's running great with no issues. Ready for the road again.